All right, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon to the East Coast, right? So just like Billy Joel said, we didn't start the fire, but we're HR. We're tasked with putting it out, right? And so what's been going on over the past couple of years? A lot. A lot's been going on, right? When you take a look at some of the things that are happening in society, things that are dominating the news, things that are on the mindsets of our employees, there's a lot. And this is after or on top of a pandemic. By the way, I'm not going to mention the pandemic because I think if I say it three times, it's going to come back. So we're not going to talk about it. We're going to kind of move on from that, right? And I use Me Too as the first kind of window just because I was obviously in Hollywood when that hit. And a lot of us went from being this kind of a back of the house HR support role to literally front and center on sound stages dealing with really unique stuff. So what I wanted to put together today was some of the things that I have seen over the past 10 or 12 years. I was very lucky to be able to build HR programs at each studio from scratch. And I've kind of seen some common things that maybe as HR we need some refreshers on, maybe some things that we need some clarification on. There is so much going on as it relates to employees' mental health. There's high burnout. There's a lot of stress, a lot of things going on, right? And we kind of feel like as HR, I think a lot of us are tired from dealing with the stuff over the past few years, the sickness, which I won't mention. And to Kristen's point, I think it actually thrust HR front and center, right? And so there's a lot more things that we are being looked at to do. People are leaning on us more. And we need to just make sure that we level set with ourselves. Okay, I have to remember, what do I need to know? What do I need to handle? What is something I can delegate? And employees are going to talk, and they're going to talk via social media. They're going to talk to you, via email, things like that. Let's talk about what we do with the stuff that we learn, right? So, I mean, there's just a lot going on, right? What we're going to talk about today is navigating. What do you do with what you learn as an HR leader? Again, so much information is coming to us. It could be through, Slack at work. It could be through an email. It could be through conversation. It could be through rumor. And as we all know, as HR, there are certain things that when we hear it, we have to do something about it. Now more than ever, people are coming to work, on Monday mornings, and people say, "How was your week? How was your weekend?" And you're going to hear about, wow, I'm really torn up about what's going over in the Middle East. Like they're going to bring up something that might have a yellow flashing light, depending on what people are saying. So we need to be aware. We need to just remember that when we hear things, it's almost like an active listening. We can't just let it go in and go out, right? We have to kind of process, is this something that I should be aware of? Should I follow that up? Should I ask the employee what they were talking about? Should I see how somebody's feeling about something? Things like that. So I wanted to open up because I love doing little scenarios. All the scenarios that I do are real things that I dealt with, and I changed the names to protect the innocent, right? So let's just jump in here real quick because I would love to get your thoughts on this situation. Scott is an HR business partner. He's attending his client's all department meeting. The company just finished its second round of layoffs in less than 6 months. Business unit leaders wanted to gather the non-impacted employees to talk about the company's future, as well as to answer questions. The head of the business unit encouraged employees, speak up, be free to ask or say anything. This is a safe space for you to share your thoughts and feelings. Scott is of Asian descent. He's towards the back of the room, standing with Linda, who's also a director in the department, who is also of Asian descent. Both Scott and Linda are part of the company's Asian Pacific Islander ERG, Employee Resource Group, and they used to work together at a prior company, so they have a pretty close, casual work relationship, right? As the business leaders were talking to the group, Linda leans over to Scott and says, "Look around. There's not many of us left." She then proceeds to lift off the names of coworkers impacted in either round one or round two of the layoffs. Each name that she mentioned was someone of Asian descent. Scott looks around the room and gives a yeah back to Linda in agreement. He thinks nothing more of it since he knows Linda really well, and Linda was simply making an observation. In fact, others in their ERG have made similar observations. And besides, the leaders declared the meeting a safe space for people to say or ask anything. So here is my question, if you don't mind, kind of throw a little, answer in the chat, which is based on this. I know you probably need more information, but based on what has been shared, is there anything further that Scott needs to do based on Linda's comment? I'll give you a couple seconds.
I'm seeing a yes. I'm seeing an absolutely. To understand the perspective. I'm seeing a yes.
Wonderful.
I'm not
All
seeing
right.
anyone saying, nope, he's just got to mind his own business.
Excellent. That's great. In the real life situation, the HR business partner did mind their own business. They thought nothing of it, right? Until something else happens. And obviously, Linda comes forward and says, well, I've shared with you, I think there's a bias in this company as it relates to those that are Asian. And I even told HR, right? So you're absolutely right. Whether it's a safe space or not, there was a comment that was made that really made it sound like, does the company have it out? Is there a bias? It was an unproportional impact that, folks that were Asian versus other races. So you are 1000% correct.
Darren,
Yes.
if I can ask a question before you moved on for some clarity, there was a comment here that says, yes, he affirmed discrimination casually. If he had not nodded and agreed, and it was simply a statement left hanging, does that change your response?
So that is problematic when somebody says, yeah. And so as an ER, some of you, I'm sure, are fantastic ER investigators, right? And we love to have those conversations. But we have to be careful about nodding to show active listening, because when we nod, it could look like we're agreeing with what they are saying, right? And so instead of copying like, let's talk after the meeting about what you meant by that, saying yeah really does sound like a kind of like an agreement that yes. Because when somebody is a leader in a company, you don't speak for yourself. You speak for the company, right? So when a leader kind of affirms something, to your point, it's basically like a party admission is what it's called in the law. So whoever brought that forward was very, very astute to realize that there was a problem from the moment that he said yeah, and then didn't do anything after that, right? It's one thing in the moment to be like, yeah, and thinking across, I got to talk to her after this, what's going on with her. But since there was no follow-up, you're right. That makes it a bit more problematic. That was a great observation. I know we've all heard of this safe space. Everyone's probably maybe even used it before, right? What comes to mind when someone says it's a safe space? And again, we don't need to go too crazy, but when you hear a safe space, what's the first thing that you think of? Anyone want to throw in the chat real quick?
Allows you to speak up with a lot of things. And they say this truly isn't a safe space. That's what they're thinking. Safe for them, not me. Wow, it's all
Yeah.
over. You can express freely. There's been a lot of different experiences clearly with this term.
Excellent. Actually, I'm glad to hear that because you're right. I mean, and I think maybe the reason why so many folks are like, yeah, when I hear that, I know that definitely it's not a safe space because probably you have seen that people have either not followed through in those confidences. The bigger issue, as we all know as HR professionals, is you can never guarantee that that meeting is Vegas. It's not what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, right? Because some things have to leave Vegas. And so if people speak up and say things that under the law we have to investigate or chase down or follow up, what you don't want to ever do, and we've all seen this before, is tell somebody from the very beginning, don't worry, it's a safe space. You should be able to say or do anything without the caveat that certain things can't stay in that box. So I think all of you probably have seen different ways where it's worked or has not worked or it's been confusing, and you're absolutely right. The thing is, if we keep it all in a safe space, it doesn't get dealt with. We can't fix what we don't know, right? So that's why the safer space is making sure we understand that we have to address certain things, obviously, that come our way, right? I do want to talk about ERGs for a moment. I know I can't really see everybody. I would ask show of hands who's got ERGs in their organization, but I think we all kind of, we all know what they are, right? And it's such an interesting scenario when you think about it, right? Because here we are as a company, and we're actually allowing people to kind of share their protected classifications freely, which is absolutely wonderful. We want to bring our best selves to work. And sometimes there's conversations in those ERGs, like, for example, what's it like to be, a parent and a caregiver working here at Netflix, right? And there's discussions about it. But there are leaders in that room by law who might be hearing these discussions where people might say, listen, I feel like as a parent or a caregiver at Netflix that, by the way, I'm making fun of Netflix. Nothing really happened like that. That the workload is too much. It's just, there's not a real flexible type of arrangement for me to be able to work and be a parent or be a caregiver, right? Things like that would make our yellow flags go up if we heard that in HR. But somehow it's completely forgiven in some respects when the ERGs have these conversations, right? So it's not like we need to pop in and kind of spy on what's going on. What I might suggest, maybe after today, you might think about, if you do have ERGs, is that you pull your ERG leaders in and be like, hey guys, you're going to have wonderful discussions. You're going to help us with, looking at the business from a more diverse perspective. But you also might hear people say things that we need to be aware of, right? And have a little training session to remind them that if something does come up regarding harassment, discrimination, bullying, bias, stuff like that, microaggressions, whatever it could be, that they really should bring that forward, right? So these are these voluntary employee organized group. They're kind of, there's usually a senior leader that's, kind of like the mentor, so to speak. But really, it's kind of, your day-to-day folks that are working, that are running the ERG, and it's based on these protected classes. And again, it's to give them a space, there's that word again, to discuss their experiences at work. Those experiences could be good. Those experiences could be not so good, and might actually trigger a responsibility to find out a little bit more about what's going on. So I want to share a couple more examples that, again, I changed the names to protect the innocent. Let me know your thoughts if you think there is any problem with this. Let's go to the first one. Following a race-based social injustice, the company's ERG, the ERG of the same race as the victim that was impacted in the injustice, asked to hold a meeting with just the ERG members of that particular race to process what happened and discuss additional support options. Now, normally ERG membership is open to employees of the featured race, as well as allies, meaning, not necessarily, from a demographic perspective, they wouldn't call themselves actually of that race, but they're allies. Maybe they're married to somebody that's of a different race, something like that, right? So for this particular meeting, however, ally members and or ERG members of other groups would not be permitted to attend. They wanted just the people who shared that layer of diversity of race to have a conversation and process something that had happened. What do you think about that? Do you think there's a problem or an issue with that at all?
I've got a comment. Groups should not be allowed to be exclusive. It could be perceived as discrimination. I think everyone's really pondering this one, Darren.
You know what? And this is obviously a real situation that happened.
It is exclusive and not consistent with the rationale of ERG. Issue is it's not inclusive.
Yeah.
It's a tricky one. I don't think it's allowed for a company, but there are caucuses outside of work where it could be acceptable.
Yeah.
So you're talking about just inside of an ERG, inside of a workplace.
That's correct. That is correct.
HR leader's responsibility and what they should be doing in this situation.
Yeah. And you're right. When whoever said it was tricky, you're 1000% correct, right? This is one of the situations where someone thought ahead to reach out to me and ask me my thoughts. And this is what my response was. Just what you all said. This is really, this kind of flies in the face of what we're trying to do, as inviting allies and being inclusive. But what I said is, if there is a situation where, and I don't think this is it, but you could take my advice and you can run with it. If you really need to get to the heart of what is the experience of working at this company as a, let's say, Black employee? Yeah, a white employee can't answer that question, right? But you get one opportunity to ask that, one. And if that's what you really, really, really are driving towards getting, then you could have a little bit of, I don't like it at all, but you sometimes could say, the reason why we're excluding this is we need to understand from that specific demographic what it is like working here. Good news is they decided to open up to everybody, right? Which I think is the right thing to do because everyone is impacted by any type of situation in the world, whether or not there is a layer of diversity that you share or not. But that's a tough one. And it does come up every once in a while where a group kind of wants to close off and have discussion. And so I think everyone's looking at it the right way. I can't say that there's never a time where you can't justify it, but it's a really bad look. Even if you can do it, it's just a really bad look, right? All right. In an effort to affect meaningful change, a company decided to create an executive acceleration program for an ERG whose membership was based on a particular protected classification. If selected for the program, these ERG members would be provided senior executive mentors, attend leadership-based training sessions and seminars, have access to guest speakers, and receive special consideration for leadership positions after they complete the program. Members of other ERGs would not be eligible to participate in this program. I pretty much know what you're all going to say, but let's go ahead and just tell me, is this okay? Do we have concerns about this?
Not okay.
Yeah.
I've opened this up when doing some research on a women's closing the gender gap, and it was an overwhelming, you select leadership by skills, ability, and potential only. Even if you're trying to give women an accelerated track, even the women said no.
Yep. And because it's a couple different reasons, right? One of the reasons is in some respects, then those people that get selected are marked as, oh, that was the diversity program pipeline leader, right? That, in other words, like they really didn't deserve it, but they were in this, which is a terrible thing to say, but that's the perception other people have. In this situation, when they came and we're very proud that they were going to do this, and I won't mention what company it was when I was there. I would say that's super. When are we going to open this up to this group and then this group? So this is the first one, right? And then the second one and third one, and there was a blank stare. And I was like, yeah. And so again, you give advice because what you don't want to do is you never want to alienate your own employees. And the concern is you do this and you're going to have other people saying, where's my program? Why can't I do this? I want to have the same opportunity. Company decided not to listen to me, which is, that's fine. You can do whatever you want. Exactly what happened was every other group said, this is discriminatory. Where is my program? Right. And so you don't want to look like you're endorsing certain employees and not certain employees, right? As an organization. All right, last one. A parents and caregivers ERG leader had recently come back from parental leave and thought the leave of absence process was confusing. They decided to solicit feedback from ERG members about their parental leave experiences via survey. The survey was sent by email, noted it was confidential and survey comments would not be shared. A respondent said they felt passed over for promotions and retaliation for taking parental leave and said the company punishes those who take their full leave allotment. Again, confidential survey comments would not be shared. That was said in writing in an email. We now have this comment. What do? We have a little dilemma, right? How do we handle?
It's a tough one. I can see everyone thinking on that one. One's thinking on that one.
I love it. I love that they're like, I'm not going to be the first one to write it down.
Policy, that the policy should be reviewed. It's hard to address. They dig into it further 110%. It's how do you dig into it when you don't know now you don't know where to go digging. You've got to deal with it. Now management knows, HR must investigate, and you've got to encourage employees to come forward and release their confidentiality. How would you go about that would be my question. This is why community group guidelines are so important. It should be clear up front. They can remain confidential and what cannot remain.
Exactly.
What part of the survey is confidential and not? This is great.
Yeah, I love that. And that's
Chiappetti and SHRM put together. Darren, I think we've got a new model here.
Fantastic. And this is, as you can tell, I'm not a big fan of the phrase safe space. And this is why. This is what we're seeing, right? In this specific example, it was actually quite a good learning moment for the leader who had sent the survey out, right? Because in working with her, what I said is, why don't you go back to that employee and say, hey, listen, I know we mentioned it was confidential, but we really need to make sure we chase things down like this. So we gave the employee the opportunity to hear from the person who said it was confidential, and they had a discussion. And I think someone maybe mentioned to it, and then the person did become okay with like, okay, well, I guess I can share it. So we were able to get to it in a good way, but the leader kind of felt bad going back with egg on her face going, yeah, I kind of said something that I really shouldn't have said. But letting them do it in their own way, for me, was fine because everybody was able to just not make a big deal about it. We're going to look into it. So exactly right.
Darren, I have to say, you said something here that was a good point. They said it was confidential. They did not say it was anonymous.
That's correct. It was not anonymous. We knew who it was.
Do not use the word anonymous.
Correct. We knew who it was, but the dilemma was the ERG head was like, well, I told them I wouldn't share it. I'm like, well, that's where our problem is. We should never have said that. but then we worked out a way where she felt good about it, the employee felt good about it, I felt good about it, and we were able to move forward. You're right. It was not anonymous. That's a good catch. I'm not going to go through law 101, right? Normally, these are the things that we're always like, okay, obviously conversations can go sideways as long as we're respectful and we're approaching things the right way. It's okay to have these discussions, right? But let me ask you this. When does a conversation or a comment or a concern that's been brought to HR's attention, when does that require further action or escalation? Does anyone have a way of kind of putting that in a kind of brief, like, you hear something? How do you know whether to be like, I don't think that's something I need to chase down, or you're like, you know what, that's definitely something I need to kind of figure out what's going on? Is there a defining moment or something that in your book your flag goes off?
Is there really something other than it depends?
Oh, who's a lawyer? I love it. I'm a lawyer too. I love the it depends. It does. It does.
I
It
love
does
it.
depend. You're right. What does it depend on?
When there's smoke, there's fire. When in doubt, investigate. Oh,
Yeah.
we need to put that one up on a wall in our conference.
No, you're absolutely right. It's no harm in following chasing anything down, to be honest with you, right?
Interest rate, frequency of complaint.
Are we talking about the complainers, who cry wolf all the time, who complain about everything, including Taco Tuesday?
Toby, if the person's experience was negative or detailed someone else's experience, when it raises an issue of either policy or legal implications, that holds up in court right there. I like that one.
Boom. Yeah. So everything that you said was correct, right? But let's look at it from what is the legal standard? What is our obligation, right? And it's this really fun thing called knew or should have known. Well, knew is easy, right? Like if we knew something, we knew something. But that should have known thing, that's the tougher part, right? It could have been like something that we heard in passing that, again, our little alarms didn't go off, but we were right there. So if we knew or should have known that the concerns were likely about discrimination, harassment, or retaliation, and in California, abusive conduct, and we failed to take prompt or appropriate corrective action, meaning we didn't chase it down, we didn't investigate, that's kind of going to be problematic. So I think everything that everybody was saying kind of follows right into this. But at the end of the day, we have to remember, all right, can I pass the should have known test on this one? And I love whoever said, you know what, there's no harm. Just with the smoke, there's fire. Just check into it. Because it could be nothing. Or you could have opened up the literal Pandora's box of a 6-month investigation. You have no idea, right? So I think that everyone's on the same page with that. But that's the standard. If you didn't know the standard, just knew or should have known is something I probably would just kind of stick in your mind, right? All right. But talking about harassment, discrimination, retaliation, right? But what if an employee, by the way, that poor red pop, like I feel bad for the red lollipop. He's obviously not being treated well. And I think the yellow lollipop feels bad too, but is afraid to say anything. So political views or activity. Are political views or political activity protected by law? Do you have to kind of do something about that if there's concerns that employees raise as we come to an election year?
I was going to say there's been a lot of articles out about this, knowing what, not in the private sector. There was a recent court case on this.
It's all literally all over the map, right? Literally all over the map. Certain states protect certain things. It's very narrowly tailored. Other states don't protect anything. It depends on the context. So you're right. This is a very big gray nebulous area. Obviously, if there's some type of hopefully every one of our companies has some type of a catch-all policy of just respectful behavior. And I'll talk about that a little bit later because I can get into some National Labor Relations Act issues. But if there's a respect overarching kind of policy, at the end of the day, that's probably what you want to have a conversation about, right? Because there are very limited, very specialized ways in which it can be in violation of law. But all in all, it's not a protected classification like this screen I had on before, right? What about physical attributes? Somebody's height, somebody's weight. And I forget the statistic of how many, I think it's 1 in 4 Americans are considered to be either overweight or obese or something like that.
I'm going to go back to some of the comments on the last one. Not as long as there isn't bullying or harassment, and you mentioned that safe place of respect, and that we're here we go, not protected under, I think that's TV said Title VII. Although not protected,
Correct.
it can be very impactful. Can you go into that a little bit, Darren, as to, though not protected, it can unravel an entire organization quickly.
Yeah, and so here's what I'll say too. Believe it or not, it is protected in certain jurisdictions. New York City was the very first. I think actually, I think Washington State maybe was first. New York City, Washington State. New York State is actually looking to have something. California is now. New Jersey. There's a couple. San Francisco, City of San Francisco. There are pockets where this is now protected, right? But not mainstream. So you're right. It's not mainstream, but it is actually added to the discrimination laws in those jurisdictions. Somebody also said, hey, it's not part of Title VII. You're absolutely right. But you could make an argument is, if somebody is overweight because of a medical issue, then you can actually kind of go through the ADA in some respects and say it's discriminatory based on that or harassing based on that. I kid you not, I worked for Disney theme parks for 20 years. My very first job was a Jungle Cruise skipper at Walt Disney World in Florida. When I was hired, when you went to casting, it was called casting because we were cast members. You might see my Disney name tags on the wall over here, right? You were put on a scale. You walked up the ramp, you started your interview with you were weighed, and there was a height and a weight. And the costumes ranged from this size to this size. If you were outside the range of costumes, we can't cast you in our show. That was until the mid-90s that Disney was able to do that. And granted, the Disney look thing, now there's beards, things like that. But that actually did happen. The other thing, though, is you're right. It's all about respect. In fact, one of the things that hair color, would you ever consider hair color to be protected, right? Could be. Hairstyles certainly could. But over in the UK, there is a thing about being a ginger. It's very disrespectful. It's one of these situations, there's a lot of bullying about it, right? So hair color, weight, height, things like that. Yeah. Sometimes protected, sometimes not. Goes back to the respect. Affiliation with or support of sports teams. What about this? Does this get heated and ugly? It's nasty.
Especially in the UK.
Nasty. Anybody here? I grew up in Boston. Anyone here from Boston? I mean, we no longer have the golden years of the Patriots, but back in the day, everybody loved to hate the Patriots, right? And so it got downright nasty when it came to sports rivalries and things like that. Not protected. And here's the thing, even if it's not illegal, it can be disrespectful. That's the most important thing, right? We want everyone to feel comfortable when they come to work every day and just, stop the childish behavior, right? I know we all feel like a babysitter sometimes. Let's talk about elections a little bit more, though, because we do have some stuff going on, right? So probably now or even earlier is a good time to prepare your leaders for what's about to happen because they're going to hear the stuff. They're going to see the stuff. I think they themselves need to be reminded what to do and what not to do, right? Some of our leaders like to jump in themselves and have a point of view. And we're not saying you can't have a point of view at work, but you as a leader are speaking for the company, not for yourself. And I have to remember that, right? So if we can educate people, leaders, hey, here's what you can say, here's what not to say. Again, it goes back to being respectful. Everyone can have their views without a doubt, right? We're not here as a company to tell you what to think. We're here to make sure that everyone feels comfortable at work, and we have obviously company policies and workplace laws that need to be abided by. I would audit. Somebody might want to wear a, depending on what type of company that you are, right? And what your dress code could look like. Somebody might want to wear a t-shirt, a candidate's t-shirt, or a button, or something like that, right? Do you have a policy on you can't wear buttons? It's also like, from a union perspective, right? You have to be consistent with basically how you're doing things. So if you have a dress and appearance guidelines, take a look at it, dust it off. Do you need to refresh it? Is it going to be fair? Would you be able to use it in a political context, but, and not in a non-political context? So that's where you run into trouble if you're not evenly applying those policies. Using company email or IM to solicit or share personal information, right? I mean, is it okay to send a little note going, hey, listen, I have got tons of Girl Scout cookies. Let me know. And then somebody else is sending, information about, hey, vote for X, Y, and Z. Like, we have to kind of look at what are our policies basically saying from the beginning. Social media versus protected concerted activity. This one's always fun, right? What that means is somebody on their personal, not usually LinkedIn, but like personal Instagram, personal Facebook, personal Snapchat, first X, Twitter, whatever it is, right? is making comments that could be derogatory or discriminatory or insensitive. That can be really tough depending on what they're saying. Again, under the National Labor Relations Act, certain categories of employees are allowed to engage in what's called protected concerted activity, right? For mutual aid and protection. So if I go on as Darren, let's say I'm covered by the NLRA, which I'm not, but let's say I am, right? And I go on my personal Facebook and I talk about how I'm working for a company that is just absolutely unsafe. I don't think that they have integrity, things like that, right? And other employees that I'm friends with hit the like button and things like that, or comment on my thread. That's likely going to be considered to be protected concerted activity, because we're all coming together saying, yes, our employer is unsafe. If it's a personal gripe that just I have, it's different, right? So it's going to be tough because you're going to probably have some situations where people come to you and say, hey, did you see Fred's Instagram? Did you see, Mary's Facebook? I'm really offended by this, or, X, Y, and Z. It's a tough situation. Obviously, you probably get your legal counsel involved. But you can let people go for that behavior. It just depends on what's going on. So there's the concern is obviously, again, the unfair labor practice under the NLRA. Guidelines about posting on company bulletin boards, things like that. Respectful, professional, courteous, civil behavior expectations. If there is a policy, right, where you're saying, listen, you got to be civil and friendly to each other, that's been challenged before. So it's good to have a catch-all, but it's got to be something that you probably want to work with your counsel on to make sure the wording is appropriate. Because there'll be an argument that's saying telling employees they have to act a certain way is basically chilling their speech under the National Labor Relations Act, things like that. And again, your harassment policies, things like that. Let's take a look at what they cover. And bullying, I'll talk about just in a little bit later, because that's a kind of a fun buzzword. Communicate. Make sure expectations are clear. There is accountability. If you're not going to follow policies, if you're going to run afoul of something, we're going to hold you accountable. And there's also helpful resources, right? It's a stressful time, things like that. Anticipate questions, maybe do an FAQ, something on like a company intranet so you can change it as quickly as you need to as things are updating, right? Give people information, stuff like that. Again, the more you communicate, the more transparent you are, the less people will fill in the blanks. All right, it's true or false time. Private employers may not be able to discipline or terminate an employee who refuses to stop confronting and arguing with other employees about their political views and their positions on current political issues, because the employees are protected by the First Amendment and have freedom of speech. True or false?
False. That's a big F. False.
Yeah, you nailed it.
Here we go.
Why is it false? Could somebody just jump in the chat real quick? Why is that false?
Hostile work environment. First Amendment doesn't apply to private employers. They can be fired for arguing.
Correct. Yeah. The amendments protect us from government action. If we worked for the government, different story, right? But private employers are not held to that same standard. So I always love, over my past 20 years of being an ER leader, when people are like, I have freedom of speech, so I don't know what you're talking about because I have freedom of speech. And I'm like, that's great. No, you don't. So it's one of these things where it's very misunderstood. Obviously, I think that we get it, but that's going to probably come out into political context. Just know that, right? Because people are watching TV and there's some legal challenges going on regarding political actions where that's kind of being thrown out, right? So they're going to see what they hear in the news. They're going to use it as well. Just know, if you didn't know, that is not an argument. That is absolutely false. If you're a government employer, sorry, different. Private employers, there's no argument, right? Okay. What I like to remind everybody is the 3 R's, okay? You're like, what do I do now with what I learned? Well, when you recognize an issue, right? Going back to our friend Scott, who should have recognized the, hey, look, there's not many more of us left. That should have been a recognizing a potential situation. Like the most important word there is potential, not recognize, even though it's in, bigger and different color. Yellow flag, like, well, he's not over here. I have a golden retriever puppy who loves to tilt his head and kind of look. And so if you have that like confused dog head tilt when you're like, I'm not sure if they should have said that, that's your moment of recognizing there's an issue. You want to report. A lot of times it's reporting to us as HR, right? But we as HR also need to report up to. Maybe it's legal, let them know, let our bosses know, things like that. And then the company will decide how to respond. Full investigation, conversations, whatever we need to do. But the 3 R's, if you can remember this, and teach your leaders this too, right? Recognize potential situation, report to the appropriate department, and then we will figure out how we're going to respond. and we'll respond to the complainant too and close the loop back with them and say, hey, appropriate action was taken if that's actually the case. Another true or false. When bringing forth a concern about harassment, etc., HR should ask the complainant if they want to make a formal complaint or report of harassment. Do it right now. You want to do, it's a formal complaint right now, or if they just wanted HR to note the concern for the record. Formal complaints of harassment should always be in writing from the employee. True or false? And it could be parts of it too, like so in entirety or little components, whatever you think.
I'm seeing false and one comment false. It's always a complaint. False, false. You gave us a little hint there that it might be a portion of it and not an entirety. So I feel like there's a two-parter here coming.
Completely false. Everything about it is false, right? It could be written on a bar napkin, right? Maybe you got through a game of charades, you realize, oh, there's harassment going on. Smoke signals, crayons. Clearly that guy's not very happy. Something's happened at work. Interpretive dance. It doesn't matter how you find out about it. Whoever said a complaint is a complaint was 1,000% correct. Okay. It does not have to be in writing. There's no such thing. There's no such thing as what? A formal complaint. It doesn't need to be wrapped up in a tuxedo and look very pretty. It could be raw, ugly, on the fly. It could be, someone shoots you a look and you're like, I know what that look means. Again, should have known. Knew or should have known. No such thing as a formal complaint. There's no such thing as the record. I love when people come to me and they're like, I want you to put this in the record because I imagine this mystical book that I open up and magic comes out of it and I get this big quill pen and write down their issue in the record. There is no record, right? That's important to make sure that employees know that when you're coming to me, I'm going to determine if I need to do something with it, right? And obviously we have those conversations in a very respectful, like, hey, listen, here's why I have to do something with what you just told me. So no formal complaints, no the record. So what if an employee starts to tell you something concerning that happened at work, but then stops and says, wait, this is a safe space, right? I think we've covered this one off. We don't have to worry about the chat. I think we all get that. What if an employee asks to speak with you off the record? We know that there is no off the record, right? So we don't want to promise that. It's difficult sometimes because you want to get them comfortable enough to talk with you, but you don't want to overcommit to what will happen next. An employee reports something, but they said, hey, can you keep this confidential? Don't use my name. That one I want to hear from you. What happens if an employee comes to you and says, keep it confidential, please don't use my name?
You can promise anonymity to the fullest degree possible, but cannot promise full. Ooh, that's an interesting one. To the fullest degree possible, but you cannot promise full anonymity. Got it. Confidential line depends on the line. A lot of depends. It's an interesting one. We've got some full confidentiality is not 100% possible. But I would add even in this day and age.
Yeah, you're 1,000% correct. A lot of times companies have it's usually a kind of, born out of the Sarbanes-Oxley Enron situation, has like a compliance hotline. And compliance hotlines sometimes do allow you, depending on the law of the country specifically, sometimes you can be anonymous in your concern, right? And so employees might know that, and they might choose the hotline to be a little bit more anonymous. The challenge is if they don't give enough information in an anonymous hotline, there's not much we can chase down, but we do what we can, right? But you're right, you can never promise confidentiality, and certain countries will not allow you to make a complaint being confidential. You have to have attribution. So it depends on the jurisdiction, it depends on the situation. But yeah, at the end of the day, everyone gets it. Like, we never want to promise anything. An employee reports something to you, but tells you, I don't want to do anything. Don't do anything with it. Let's just wait and see what happens to see if the behavior continues. Has anyone had this situation happen and then it backfired on them?
Looks like I had a situation like this happen where the head of the company was in a relationship with a department head.
I love those.
I shared that based on what was reported. He had an obligation to investigate.
Yeah. The wait and see what happens is always a recipe for disaster, right? Because let's say something else happens and that employee decides to claim retaliation. And now they're going to say, well, HR knew about it. Like, It is just a trap that you don't want to fall in, right? Lastly, I think we know the answer to this one. A fellow leader is facilitating a discussion with an ERG member, with ERG members, and states whatever says in the room today, stays in the room today. We all know this is not Vegas. All right. So we want to always make sure that these are the key things that we report. Everyone knows this. Don't need to go through this again. But the most important thing is, even if you don't think there's anything to it, again, if there's that person that cries wolf all the time, you're like, really, Fred, again, what's happening today? The 29th complaint, you decide I'm done investigating Fred's crap. The 29th complaint is the one that goes to a lawsuit. So you always have to look into it no matter what. You can obviously add into your assessment of credibility the fact that Fred loves them. You know, Fred's punch card, you got the free TV for how many complaints already, but you don't want to ignore it, right? Reporting is a must, not a may. Okay, writing. Just really quickly again, I know we all know this. This is more of a let's refresh our leaders' recollections on this, especially as it relates to two things: medical accommodations and things that people are complaining about, right? What you don't want to hear is people kind of, throwing things out in email where they're documenting, a political situation or something like that, right? So we don't want to draw conclusions. You can see if somebody wants to send an email like, hey, Sally's being sexually harassed by Jimmy. No, you don't say that because that's a statement. It's a party admission. It makes it look like you've looked into it and there is a problem. Better is Sally raised concerns about Jimmy's conduct. Okay, who really talks like that? But yeah, that's a great way of doing it, right? The better thing is, hey, call me when you have a moment. And you're not putting it in writing, right? These are all things I've dealt with in my career. These are my favorite things I saw in email. I think Jimmy should be fired for bullying Fred. Thank you very much. It's not your call to make, right? He must be bipolar. There's clearly something medically wrong with him. No, you are a hair and makeup crew member. You're not a psychiatrist. Let's not put that in there, right? Trust me, I know crazy, and Mark is crazy. Yeah, that was a good one. And then I want to hire her, but I don't want to bring her into a hostile environment. My head spun on that one. So just be very careful about what we put in writing. But again, remind our leaders. If any of you are in California, you're aware of the CCPA, the Consumer Protection and the Privacy Act, right? Which is now opened up to employment. And employees can ask, I need to see all the things that contain my information. They might be able to get these emails that said, I think Mark is crazy. So there's another reason, especially, in California. Other states obviously have different laws as well, but California is being a little bit more strict about it. So be really careful about, making sure our leaders realize they need to, be careful about what's in writing. Liability. Again, any leader, any supervisor can be personally liable if they don't, for their behavior, and if they fail to report. But wait, there's more. We're just going to go through this really quickly. This is what keeps me up at night, right? I wanted to share with you kind of my list of things that I am seeing from a trend perspective. And I'm seeing that these are the things that we need to kind of get ahead of, right? Return to office, hybrid, remote. Every one of us has heard this. I think we have PTSD over it. You're going to see me on the floor just rocking back and forth and moaning after a while because this has become such a thing, right? This is still going to be a thing. Absolutely, there's different camps. It's creating an issue. I know that they're saying the Great Resignation is generally kind of flattening out, but with all the employees that I've talked to, the different companies that I worked at during this time frame, people want flexibility. And so there really is just a line in the sand from that camp and a line in the sand with the camp of you're coming back to work. A company with the emerging workforce, you must have stated points of views on social issues. You can't be neutral anymore. So I worked for Disney for 20 years. A lot of you probably remember there's a fight with the Florida governor and Disney because Disney decided to say something regarding a law in Florida. And there was a lot of backlash of it. Employees demanded, because Disney usually kind of comes ahead and makes comments about things, but the then CEO decided not to. The employees demanded it. And so employees now are demanding a company not sit on the fence. And it's very interesting to watch how much of a problem it is if a company doesn't, get into the fight and give their opinion. Zero tolerance for harassment and discrimination. No longer oh my gosh, we've all been through this, this is a rite of passage. Absolutely not. The emerging workforce is having none of it. And in some respects, it's great, to be honest with you, because they're not standing for any of the crap that a lot of us just got used to because that's how workplaces were. That is coming down. Less and less and less acceptance. The challenge is they have unreasonable expectations of what's going to happen next. If a person makes a comment that's offensive, that emerging workforce employee wants them fired. You're not going to fire them because you wouldn't fire somebody necessarily, depending on what it is, right? For a comment. And if they're not happy about the fact you didn't fire them, they'll take it to social media. That is the new great equalizer. Again, coming from entertainment, look what happened to Ellen DeGeneres, right? It was folks that were like, you know what? You're not going to do anything about it. I'm going to go to BuzzFeed. BuzzFeed broke, but show was done 1 year later. By the way, that was the worst kept secret in Hollywood. We all knew that that was going on, which is unfortunate.
Darren, we had a great comment here that define offensive now, because offensive can mean so many things. And we've got about 5 minutes left.
Cool.
Timekeeper here. Want to make sure, and I appreciate it. We've got some questions and comments going on in here, and we'll get what we have time to.
Yeah, no doubt. And so you're absolutely right. It's objective. It's the reasonable person standard, but it's also subjective. And let me tell you, you're right. That target is moving every single day, without a doubt. So you're right to kind of point out that it's tough to really know where the line is in some respects. Privacy laws we talked about, being bullied. Again, being bullied 9 times out of 10 is my leader is keeping me accountable for my job performance. It's not really bullying, but that is a buzzword that's thrown out there, right? California, real quick, if you're from California, you probably have seen these. Please just make sure you're familiar with some of these things, like the paid sick leave changes. Some non-competes are just done. They are done in California. There's some new reproductive leave laws, a workplace prevention program, important, it's coming up. I mean, July is not that far away, believe it or not. It's already March, right? Arbitration issues, the drug use. I think probably a lot of us understand that now in California that you can't do adverse employment actions for off-duty use. Retaliation, rebuttable presumption. If you fire somebody within 90 days of complaining about either pay disparity or wages, it's a presumption of retaliation. And of course, know your minimum wage increases. Probably every person, wherever you are right now, your states probably have something similar. Just make sure that you take a look at it and see kind of what's going on.
Darren, quick question. Is bullying unlawful in any of the states at this point?
No. Yes and no. California has what's called abusive conduct. If anyone's read the definition of abusive conduct, I have no idea what it means. And so every time there's been a case that's come to me, and I'm based in California, and we look at it from a billing perspective, we're like, yeah, I don't think it fits that definition because it's a strange definition. So there are things that are kind of codified. There really isn't any bullying. I will tell you, I don't know if any of you have either employees or offices or anything in Vancouver, British Columbia. British Columbia does define it. And bullying in British Columbia is anything that is intimidating or, what's the other word? I'm going to lose it. Intimidating. I'll think of it. I'll put it in the chat if I can. But it's very, very broad. Very broad. So just know that if you have operations up there, that's an issue. Sorry, I put this fine print. I am a lawyer, but nothing I said today is legal advice. I have to do this. I apologize. And there we go. So get some time.
Fantastic. I will encourage everyone. Thank you. We will make this video available on, I've had a couple, will you share the PowerPoint? Can we get more of this? We will make it available on our YouTube channel and we will share it out. We will pin you, Darren. Obviously, everyone can reach out to you on LinkedIn. I think we're about to double your followers. You are incredible. And thank you for sharing your insights. I've seen some things of we need a repeat, we need a chapter 2. This is why we're starting this series, is we will have monthly topics. You will get a survey afterwards, and that's not necessarily on Darren's performance. We know it's 5 stars all the way across. This is to give us feedback on what was helpful, what was not helpful. Do more of that. Yes, please. We're going to have a series of these, 3 more over the next 3 months. We'll take all the feedback. And then, yes, we will do chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, because we know that there needs to be a place to really level up HR leadership, especially here in the US and those who are global, where we can ask questions. There will be some follow-ons. I'm sure we have a lot planned here for the space. Darren, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
We are rooting for you. We're excited. We understand the immensity of your undertaking. And I appreciate that you shared this huge news and said, but I'm still committed to everything I committed to you, Kristen.
Yes.
And that just says a lot about your character and your integrity, especially as an HR professional.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you, everyone. It was really great. I appreciate you having me.
All right. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and thank you for joining Cerius HR today.